Gervais Restaurant, authentic French cuisine in Silicon Valley.
It's always good to see these familiar faces, and I have a few new folks here. And welcome to the Geek Fest, and Sun Labs Open House. And this is one of the most pleasurable sort of events that I have, because it's not only gets to sort of get our kids, but our folks to really get to communicate what they're doing. That's a very special thing about the labs is that it's a lot of small teams, and it's typically, I mean, the average size is what, 3 people, 3, 5. It really gets big if we put like a dozen people on something. We then begin to worry. And what's very and it's great. There's just tremendous amount of energy and enthusiasm for what these folks are doing, and it's great to have them have a forum, and that includes the employees around the company, and a lot of the art, if you will, of technology transfer is really about the context for the technology transfer. It's all about people, and it's how people really move with their ideas. So in fact, that's probably the predominant mode by which large projects get transferred out of the labs, is that these groups of people who've been working on their passion actually get recruited into the product groups and go off and do things. And it is a style of innovation that's kind of characteristic of Sun too. You look at some of the most interesting, best things I think that have come out of the company. They start with groups of 3 or 4 or 5 people, and it's not just the labs. It's you look at Solaris 10, things like ZFS, D-Trace, Nodes. All those were like 5-person teams that went off and did these things. And it's a characteristic of the company, which is at the core, the company is very much around distributed innovation. And so in a way, this is a bit of a celebration of that. We're also this year, we're doing it, I think this is the first time we've done it sort of on the main campus, and that's for two reasons. One, the labs until a few years ago had not been located on the main campus out here. We had been over in Mountain View in Building 29, which many of you may remember, and that building was part of the Sun campus when Sun was over there, and then we moved here, moving the labs into sort of the center of engineering. And you've seen with some of the recent real estate investments we're doing in the Bay Area, this campus is going to be very crowded, shall we say. And
Gervais Restaurant, authentic French cuisine in Silicon Valley.
That's a good thing, and having people sort of in the thick of it. I know that there was a big thing we announced. I can't even keep track of the days here. Tuesday or Wednesday? Wednesday, that was it, Wednesday. I mean, my problem with the whole thing is we've been of course, working on what are we doing with the portfolio, I'll say from the R&D side, for a long time. And this is a long-term planning kind of thing. And then finally the public events happen, and it's always, for me, it's like, oh yeah, right. We haven't announced that, don't we? But let's just say it is neither paradoxical nor ironic that we're having a labs open house function at this time. It is purely coincidental, right? So it's not. This is not some sort of last breath of innovation out of the company. And in fact, quite to the contrary. One of the privileges of the new role that I have in a more central role of oversight and management of the R&D portfolio is exactly being able to go through a process where we distill the portfolio into what are the real innovative components, what are the ones that are quite frankly legacy, and how do you sort of take the focus of the company into those things that are really representing innovation and reinforce that. And that's exactly what we're doing. So well, the general position, the statement we have to make is, here's the restructuring we're doing. The restructure is not simply a let's go reduce costs and get on with things. Restructure is we're taking the opportunity to go reinforce vectors that we think are particularly pointing to the future. And if there's any irony to be had, it is that a few years ago, I'm reading some of the popular reporting about the company was a criticism that we were holding on to the past. And that, and I still see this written today. In fact, there's at least one person in this room who wrote that the thing that we're suffering from now is there are much cheaper servers that can be had at a fraction of the cost of some systems. At least one person wrote that. It turns out, and since I know you all are, I'm not usually a very aggressive person. I'm passionate but not aggressive. That, of course, is factually incorrect. And that may have been factually correct 3 or 4 years ago, but I leave it as an open challenge to you to go get some substantiation that, in fact, that there are servers that have equivalent function performance, some part of the product line that we sell at a fraction of the cost of the price that we sell it for, because it simply isn't true. The product line that we have is not only very broad-based in its price, in under $1,000 servers to multi-million, but at each of those points are very price performance competitive. And so let's not have those old things, right? But the irony, as I'd say, is if there's anything that the kinds of critiques that we see people who are really kind of studying what we're doing as a company is betting too much on the future. So it's a kind of an interesting other position to be in. But I'll say that there is, with no hesitation inside the company, we look at what we are doing in terms of where we think the business will be and where IT will be and where the market will be. And I think the very sort of salient aspect of the time that we're living in, something that people hear me talk about a lot, but I would like to just sort of illustrate it, is this classic, what's known as a classic phase change, right? It's sort of, this is time here, and this is IT as we know it. And this is the, everything as a service, or whatever you think this new world looks like, really essentially the distillation of IT components into very large-scale service providers who specialize in components providing services, the Googles and Salesforces and eBays, et cetera, of the world, and how those services are composed, how they're monetized, what does that whole world look like? That is a very, very different world. The sensibilities here, the economics, what's important from a product, a software point of view, than this world is today. In fact, it's different in some sense, right? These are even harsher critics. That what you have to do to perform to meet the needs of someone like a Salesforce.com or Google is quite a bit more in terms of the sort of veracity of the engineering and the product capabilities that you do than the style at which you engage customers in IT as you know it. Right? Be a little less abstract about that. Sort of the bulk of enterprise IT, of course, is replete with concerns about complexity, cost, compliance, sort of how do people really manage through the and integrate across the legacy that they have, as well as be able to adapt to the meaning of what the web means and the internet in general. And so this gets very people intensive. It has things like services, global services being kind of at the center point of the engagement with the customer. When you're out here and worrying about sort of these customers and the sort of fewer, larger, more sophisticated ones, then there are actually much sort of more hardened questions that are asked about the system, which is, so what is its ability and total and cost of maintaining a level of service? Right? That's if you really look at what dominates things here, and it's managing to very large scale service levels. So if you want to get a very sort of simple view of what we're doing in Sun and around the R&D portfolio and the management of it is there's a lot of R&D dollars that are going here and dollars that are going here. And from a business point of view, the marketplace is still about sort of 90% of the mass is here, I would say, okay? Maybe 80 or 90 is here, and maybe 10 to 20% is here. Okay, so when you look at what is it that pays the bills and moves the kit and services and all of that every quarter, it's actually still IT as you know it. If you look at where all the exponentials are and where the really interest in increasing demand, it's this, it's the new service providers, right? It's getting onto those growth curves. And so, if you look at the art of sort of R&D investment, you're always dealing with things which are 1.5 years out. Those are sort of bets that you make, and a lot of the process is, so how do you think about the balance between these, these investments and sort of the current money-making stuff and the stuff that you're betting on the future, and importantly, how do you sort of get a coherent shift of focus over to here? Let me say a couple more things about this. One is that the qualities that we think are really important here, if you look at things like I said, like service level or total power consumption of systems, or complete cost of operation, this is a big systems problem. It's at the core of it. It's not about boxes and not about bits of software here and there. It's really about how does it all fit together. And so an analogy I can give you is, we can go have perfected portable power generators and made those commodities and built them in high volume. If you really want to go build sort of reliable, economic, environmentally appropriate power plants, you don't stack up a bunch of Honda generators and expect them to get there. Right? There's a considered sort of systematic engineering that has to take place there. And then finally, in the context of today, what is the labs doing? And what is its really important function for the company is to be looking out into the future here and to be taking sort of sample points with these small teams. And one nice thing about having small teams in a relatively small organization there is you get to sort of do a scattering of 20, 30 sort of interesting points in that space and watch them and go nurture them, and the ones that look actually promising are options that the company can choose to exercise, and ones that don't, you stop them and move on and do something else. So it's sort of a wonderful sort of expeditionary force out here is what Sun Labs does. And the other thing you'll see about it is there are projects that are concerned with this big systems problem, but there are an equal number of projects, if not more, that are concerned with, so what's going to really be interesting out here. So we have people and actually things. I won't try to render a car or a thing or anything like that for you, but things, right? And they interact with this, right? That's sort of the, I can say, I look at something like at the iPod, and I say, wow, behind every interesting device is a more interesting service. Right? And go look at the Razr or iPod, or all these things are really access points to from our point of view, the infrastructure, because in fact, our business model was providing that infrastructure, and exploring that space from a whole lot of reasons, in particular one that's a developer focus and a creativity focus here, because the value of this side of the map and its rate of growth and its robustness is very much a function by what's the utility that it provides the people and things that are accessing it. It's a really simple thing to say, right? It's a amazingly sort of difficult space to go navigate. How do you get people productive and go innovate over in that space? And so that's what we're doing. As you walk around the labs and look at things, think of them in this context. Trying to understand and paint aspects of the picture of the future, and then being able to take those pieces and in big systems problems, we're a systems company, is to be able to harvest some of those artifacts and actually deliver them out in the system context. Right? And that's what we do. And I will say, from a personal point of view, every time I interact with this, I'm excited about what we do. This is a really interesting time to go do this kind of R&D alignment in a company, because we haven't done that substantially in the past, right? It's been a piece of the company that we've been pretty careful to protect over the past 5 years. And
sorry, but you're saying that there is a realignment. So how was it before that? And what's
the realignment is that we're going through a process. This is the part of the restructuring of the company, which is we're looking at all aspects of the company. How is it? There's a financial model to go meet, and I won't talk responsibly about that, so I won't talk about it. There's an R&D model there, which is what's the relative balance and importance of the investment in the portfolio? And we've gone through a very detailed process in trying to evaluate that. And there are a couple of reasons. Sometimes we're always doing that, right? We get to use this as an opportunity to do this in some fairly substantive ways. I think the way to perhaps think about this is not so much, we're going to stop this project and start this new one. That is actually less of that. It's more of, you think take something like systems and network management, right? How much are you worried about this customer versus how much are you worried about that customer? And how does that change sort of the emphasis on what you do and why you do it? You can even ask basic things around Solaris, or go look at hardware programs. Right? If you look at the hardware systems that are valuable here, they're in fact different than what's valuable here. And we've spent quite a few years now. This is not something new looking at this. And you see some of the artifacts and things like Niagara, and what is the sort of power footprint there. You'll see some very interesting things. Do we publicly talk about the date of the stuff?
Yeah.
Galaxy stuff. What do we say, Chris, before I fall into that? Right. We have real soon now some very interesting system announcements that are out here, and so part of it is that we look at the, what feels very different now is we've got a lot of wind in the sails in some points of innovation that are building tremendous volume in the marketplace, certainly around the leading edge of the communities that are important leading indicators for the future. And those are really the developers and early adopters. So if you look at things like Solaris 10, to Niagara, to Galaxy Systems, to what's happening with identity management, some really key components in the storage area. There's a lot of wind in those sails, and so we're actually feeling like that's a good sort of forward, if you wish, aegis under which to go do even other shifts and bets in the portfolio. Yes.
Well, massive kudos for sort of analyzing the world and knowing where it's going, but the trick, of course, is everybody's kind of like a victim of their history and their org chart, and you just talked about this realignment to bring your org chart in line with where the future's going to be, whatever. So to sharpen my thinking a little bit, talk about those 3 or 4 vectors you mentioned.
Okay, so
what is this company going to about in terms of these vectors?
Yeah, to a certain extent, companies do reflect the products do reflect the organizations. I'm not talking so much that we didn't announce any big organization realignments. We've done some.
You shut 5,000 people, so you're putting some muscle here and cutting some there.
Yeah, that's not necessarily a structural change in the organization.
So everything's normal, but the world's changed.
I actually don't understand what you're asking here.
What you said, we made these changes in line with
we announced that
these changes in line with these vectors. So what are these vectors that?
I was going to tell you on an R&D side. Okay, so that's fine. If you look at what's important over here, you can see things as probably at the biggest level that you'll notice that what's important here is whatever name you want to talk about. That it's certainly horizontal scale, and it's, as I said, it's really it's not that I stack up a bunch of systems and sort of network them together, but it's sort of the understanding of a bunch of systems stacked together as a system. Right? This is a systems problem, and right now, if you look at anyone who does it, and that's most everyone who's in this space is basically doing. You have to do horizontal scale because there are no single systems which are big enough. It's all left as an exercise to the user. There really are no sort of standards around horizontal scaling in an operating system sense. Operating systems are sort of nodal focused entities. When you talk about Solaris or Red Hat or Windows, in the context of what are the sort of shared memory nodes that they run on. When you then talk about, well, tell me about 10 or 100 of them, you get a whole set of interesting answers, which will invoke things like network management and systems management. Basically, people talking about a lot of what has been going on here and trying to apply it over here. We certainly have had a long-term investment in technologies like M1 as an example, for how do you talk really sensibly of the operating environment around horizontal scale. I would encourage you all to, there's a DARPA talk about our high productivity computing systems. It's here. I think it's pretty much it's a more overview talk that you'll get some ideas of the kind of scales that we're talking about of tens of thousands, hundreds, or millions of nodes or threads in these systems, and what does that look like. The storage architecture, the management around that, how ISVs actually look at it and approach it. What are the models by which you place them on the network? And you see lots of activities around that. They look at it the lens of what we're doing with utility computing and SunGrid, from essentially network scale file services to stuff that I said, watch this space, and you'll see more coming out over the next few months. So it's not, in some, and I don't want to, one thing I want to be careful about is you seem to be getting, I may have imparted enthusiastically the sense of, well, we just figured this out and we're doing it, right? Everyone who knows me knows I've been talking about this for a long time. And we have been investing a long time in, what is this new stack out here and what does that look like? I think what you'll see from us is the reinforcement of that future is not only, valid and important, it is arriving in a time that we think we will get competitive advantage by being able to organize ourselves around. And I think that's a critical thing for us to accomplish, because if a systems company is valuable for anything, it is valuable in the ability to sort of morph into what are the properties that are important for systems in the future, and maybe be a little less abstract about that. If you look at sort of the fixed point here, right, it looks like, well, the big one has been Microsoft, right, Intel, Dell as the systems point for this, and Microsoft and the Intel fab, and clearly there are other folks who may build that, but that's a model that everyone has known and understood, and you can look at each of these points and evaluate sort of how they're doing and what's the health of their business and the like. The simple fact is that this model has been tuned up. I mean, you say I use this term fixed point, but it's really been tuned up for the architectures that exist here. And it does that actually really well and in high volume. In fact, it has become such a stable notion of what that architecture is that folks like Dell, who basically have just been, the integration and receiving end of this, is that, they're under a lot of attack in terms of what's the differentiated value that they actually offer versus somebody else who just can do the same set of supply chain management or distribution channel. Someone like Intel is under the same kind of set of pressures with AMD as an example that has sort of figured out what is the marginal in some cases interesting stepwise innovation that you do here, and clearly Microsoft has a whole set of challenges around maintaining the value of their business model. And I'll put in here, there's Red Hat and there's Solaris, which are all, you can look at it in the context of sort of this left-hand side and continuing to drive towards that space. The question comes up, though, is that these produce a system and a set of architectures. What if that architecture changes, or that system changes, and the value changes? Right? Or there are things in there that you want to do. As an example, introduce throughput computing. Let's talk about that the workload shift, that it's less about a single task and throwing all of the energy into getting a single task done, and it's more about what's the volume you get done at what kind of investment of energy. So that's the whole Niagara T1 story. What is the ability for this sort of ecosystem to adapt to that? And it will, right, over time, that will happen. You'll see sort of increasingly multi-core things come out of here, multi-threading things, and these operating environments learning about them. Where we have, sort of our unfair systems advantage here is essentially by, the pieces in the company. If you look at our cut through distance, sort of the operating, it's not the fab, but it's the ability to do systems assembly. We ought to be able to get these pieces to move forward in a much more rapid rate and what that model does. And indeed, we do. I mean, you see things like T2000 with 32-thread, very energy efficient throughput engine. When is that going to appear from that ecosystem? So it's going to be what? And we'll be working on the next thing. And if you look around at the labs, you can look at a project there, for instance, Maxwell. I think we're showing that today, are we? Yeah, Maxwell? No? Maxwell, go ahead. Go ahead and go look at it anyway. Go ask somebody. It's a great project. It basically is one that completely challenges the assumptions around how memory systems work inside computers. That the flat virtual memory page loading systems are an artifact of when we used to use disk drives to extend virtual memory in machines. But if you ever swap out to disk now, you're off in some really bad, very hurting space. And we don't do that. So Maxwell takes a look at, well, what if we're talking about building virtual memory systems really around objects and around object lifetime, and sort of you start to erase the boundary between what we call a box or a computer and its network collection of its brothers and sisters. So it's very much looking at these horizontally scaled systems as single machines. What are the principles there? Yeah. So if you look at the dynamics in this business, it takes if Intel comes up with an innovation in the processor, if you're at all sort of cognizant of, for instance, their relationship with Microsoft, it will take a long time to get Microsoft to essentially address, exploit, be able to pull that feature to market. Yes.
Gervais Restaurant, authentic French cuisine in Silicon Valley.
Two very down-to-earth question. So how is the restructuring affecting the labs? How many projects do you have to stop? How many projects do you maybe use?
Some labs?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't, right now I don't want to start this path of, what particular project is going or isn't
Did
going.
it affect, and what's the
there's nothing that you would look from externally that looks significant, certainly in some labs, because if you were to just sample some labs from year to year, you'll see new projects start and other ones stop. If you go look at some labs, come back to this event next year, you'll see the same thing. Some projects have started, some stop. What's the actual equilibrium point of that? Well, that's an internal question.
And the level of investment, did it
Can I
change?
take a different approach at that question?
Sure.
Roughly what percent of the total Sun R&D budget goes into Sun Labs?
2%.
2%?
Yeah.
And is that likely to change as
No.
a result of the restructuring?
No.
So essentially then, and will Sun change its R&D, the total R&D pie as a result of the restructuring?
Likely. Okay, so we as a Sun Labs principle, we kept it small, intentionally so. We believe in small things. That's good. That's kind of innovation. We like to do is to take the people out of labs, move them into the divisions, and we do that at a rate of typically about 20% of the organization per year moves out of labs. You won't find that elsewhere. That's a huge thing. The other thing you'll find elsewhere are labs. If you go to Microsoft, for example, they're probably more like 5% of R&D in their research labs. That tends to be a little more typical. I know there are well over 1,000 people in the Microsoft labs, and I guess their R&D budget is 3 or 4 times the size of ours. And if you do the percentage math, that puts them at about 8x, 10x our labs, and they are about that. Yes.
Do these people get moved, like maybe their project has gotten large enough to get the attention of engineers in other departments, so do these people move with them? And also, are these projects handed off to their corresponding departments, or are they maintained in labs until they're ready to go to market?
Yeah, so think those are great questions, and a model that we think is rather unique is that we strongly encourage the people to move with projects, to form the sort of nucleus of the new team. And in fact, I actually explicitly fund it that way. So as a product group wants to take in new folks, we share the cost for the first year of the new folks. So it's not like, here, you wanted this, it was a good idea, now you start paying for it, and I'm going to take the money back. So what we do is we do this declining rate where the first quarter that the engineers are in the product group, I'm paying for them all. And the next quarter is 75%, and then 50%, and then 25%. And then a year later, it's the division has taken the entire team over. And you know, those resources go back to Bob at that point and get to reinvest. And so that turns out to be a very powerful technology transfer function because it encourages people to move with it. In terms of state of development, we want to prove that things are possible to do in the labs and give demonstrations of their ability to be, you know, transformed into a product in a reasonable amount of time. Depending on what we're doing, we'll take it further down that path or not. We like to have usable artifacts that go over to the product groups, but not whole products. You know, I'm not in the business of going and creating whole product groups here. That in fact is really a very expensive hobby. That would take us well beyond the number of people that we have. And the thing that is different is we do measure ourselves on the people and ideas that move. That actually Bob's compensation is set on that as well as mine. You know, what are the artifacts and technology and what are we accomplished there? And I don't think that's true in many other corporate labs. Yes.
So, sorry. I mean, Jonathan talks a lot about looking for this iPod moment and something that could give Sun a real infusion. You know, what's the single most likely thing, in your opinion, that could turn into that iPod moment?
Which of your children do you like better?
Yeah. Wow, that's a great question. I think if you look at it from the software side of it, Solaris 10 is that moment for us. If you look at the system side, I think it's we're seeing some very interesting play on the T2000 in particular, as well as the Galaxy, the Galaxy and Alpha and stuff. I mean, I just think that, if you look at the latest Gartner numbers, that we took market share. That was a cause for a lot of corks to pop around here, and actually took some significant market share out of Delphi of all places too. So I think the market is beginning to lead to those conclusions, and you know all the code names and all the names of projects that we're doing anyway, because they're always published on. So. And there are a couple that are yet to be announced, and I think I would really put it in that category.
So, is there something that's more on the research cusp? Just something that we haven't even kind of seen yet?
Oh, something that you would see like...
Solaris 10 is right out there. Yeah, I mean...
Well, what point in time do you want to look at? If you go look at the labs, you go be the judge of what things you think are there. I'll tell you the set of technologies around the DARPA program. These are proximity I/O, silicon photonics, what we're able to do with Solaris across very large scale systems, and man, that stuff that looks really good. That's out there. There's no question about that. Yes.
Paul mentioned earlier that 2 years ago you started focusing more on consumer-facing technologies, consumer-facing services, and certainly see a lot of the evidence here.
Yeah.
Can I get a bit of background on kind of thinking for Sun going more into that direction?
2 answers for that. One is, if you really want to understand what's important in this space of building infrastructure, you better understand how it's going to be used and stimulate a style of use that we know how to serve. So that's and some of these things are not they're not trivial kind of questions. So the nature of, let's say, a security relationship or a trust relationship of the individual or the devices to the infrastructure, what does that look like? Led to things like our elliptic curve cryptography implementations, and we're quite advanced in that, and the ability of taking small devices to little things and letting them engage in secure conversations, not only among themselves but with the big things back here. So that's a reason. The other one is, and I think I'm gonna sound like Jonathan here, right? But it is all about communities, and the food chain in the business is, starts with the developer, and by saying the developer, in fact, is a complete overgeneralization. It's like saying the Americans, right? And so you look at really many different facets of the developer community, folks over here, but also, interestingly, in the consumer space, a property here is that consumers themselves are becoming developers of sorts and creators of sorts, whether that's blogging, whether that's taking photos off your camera and having them go up to MySpace and that kind of thing. There's a creative aspect. If you look at sunspots, the reason why I keep investing in his project here and in this is not because we're going to turn into some sensor company. I mean, that's kind of like that's a brain dead thing for us to go to. What's really interesting there is we pioneered, yet another reduction in the size of a Java virtual machine, and have opened up a set of embedded devices to programmers and developers that could never get access to it before, and just simply because it was too hard or arcane, or you had to do assembly language or some dialect of C in some RTOS environment. Here it's a very accessible environment, and we get a lot of kids in school interested in our stuff and developing around it, and the Sunspot stuff has a huge demand in universities, and we've been running some interesting projects out there. So that's why I care about it, and as well as things like you see, we've done things in IP, set-top box kind of stuff. I don't think we've been very public about that, but that is a lot of exploration of what are really simple devices look like out here that get served off that infrastructure. Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about where we are today, IT space, and maybe where you see that going over the next couple of years?
You want to focus me in a little bit on? That's a good broad question. I'll run with it for an hour.
The IT space first. I mean, I guess I have a picture of where you see the services space going, but in terms of the IT space and the technologies that you think people are going to need in the next several years.
Yeah, what I mean by this is IT too, all right?
Well, I'm sorry, well, I should say...
Like ITs we know it are classic IT.
Classic or IT or corporate, more corporate,
Yeah, okay, so I'll see how some of this gets printed. a lot of our current customers are uninteresting over time. That's going to get me really popular out here, okay? What you really, I mean, there's a fundamental thing that goes on in the technology world. We all know that, right? We know this is not a semi-log plot. So if I go draw Moore's law on here, it's an exponential. So it says, essentially, as I go through time, Moore's law doesn't say this, but a consequence does, that as I go through time, I'm able to, with the same investment in the system, I'm able to do a lot more computing, right, and a lot more storage. And ergo, right, the root of the non-factual information that gets propagated by several of you when you write, our systems are being replaced by ones at a fraction of their cost, because that's always true in time. You can take some of the old system and replace it with a new one. The question is, looking at a moment in time, what's the competitiveness of systems, right? That was my challenge to you, is at this moment in time. But back to the point is that if you look inside what a lot of this IT is, this is like running SAP and Oracle and making stuff work. One of the great accomplishments that some had in the late 90s, we all look at it as .com stuff. The real kind of backbone of what we were doing on an engineering side was getting SAP to run at very large scale and essentially allowing companies to consider doing things like single instance SAPs off of these really large, like E10Ks, right? Well, I've got a Niagara chip, I should say T1, right? I have a T1 chip that by all sort of metrics, except floating point, has the throughput, power, memory bandwidth, I/O bandwidth of the original E10K. So it's a big box, it's now down to a single chip. And the question is, for most companies, have their computing demands on the ERP infrastructure, have they grown to, exponentially? Do they, along with Moore's Law, are they happy with that single, T2000 to actually do what the 10K did before? Most of the cases, actually, they're pretty happy with that, right? And if you see a lot of the big trends in here, like around when you see virtualization and consolidation, it is, we want to take a lot of things that we've done, and we need fewer and fewer systems to do them on, so let's get our cost of operation down by consolidating. That ultimately says that computing gets less and less interesting over time. And actually, I'll give you a really simple way. Here's another way to think about this scenario. Here's your thought experiment. Walk up to an individual who uses IT today, right, and say, you do this, and let you do this when you're doing an interview. and ask that person, say, I'm going to grant you 1 million times more computing today, same price that you have, right? But I'm just, you're the computing genie, right? And your wish is there, right? Now, what will be the response of that person that you're talking to? It's a really interesting question, right? If you go into, go into a CIO who's worried about running their SAP or their email or any of that infrastructure, they go, I don't know, I'm not going to close my books every millisecond or something like that, right? I sure would like to talk to you about getting it for, how about maybe 10 times the computing I have today at 100,000 the price? Right? Write that down. That would probably be the answer. If you walked over to, somebody doing chip design or, aerodynamic engineering or walked over to someone in capital markets analyzing risks of portfolios and said, here's 1 million times more computing, they will ask you, why not 1 billion? Right? Because I could use that too. Or if you even went over to Google and said that, they would go crazy because they go, wow, with 1 million times more computing, I can either, modulate my energy bills right now and do that. But they know exactly where they would like to go expend that in terms of doing like real search, semantic search, rather than syntactic, page ranking kind of things. So it's an interesting point. And the only reason I say that is that it's kind of the deep question to go ask here is to, are the applications and the uses of those applications and what you see going on here, are they fundamentally things that are going to go, track at Moore's Law or above, or are they things that are going to track below? And if they're below, they become less interesting and consolidated over time. And somebody else is going to deal with that. In fact, it doesn't make a lot of sense for those people to even restructure that computing, just simply because the opportunity cost.
But how do you grow your business with them?
You don't.
So would it be would it be fair to conclude that you're looking to grow more and put more effort into the services side?
Well, absolutely. Where are the demands, computing demands, and you see things like resurgences in technical computing demand. That's a lot of what's underneath what is happening certainly with our Opteron systems, but in general, that's a lot of the market that those folks have been appealing to. You'll see any of the places where people are consolidating heavily in the market, like a Salesforce.com, right? Each of the individual companies, you know, they aren't having exponential growth in their sales teams, right? But what they are doing is that there's a huge latent market out there in small, medium-sized, and now larger businesses of taking all the individual CRM systems and actually consolidating them into a service. And so if you look at Salesforce, they grow at a really interesting exponential rate, and we love supplying them with, you know, fulfilling their orders every quarter. And that's sort of a market consolidation thing. As you look around to a lot of the stuff that you'll see in demos out here, there are new areas like what are the demands of new media, and you know, sort of the fact that all of these people and devices become content creators. There's a very large number out here that this gets multiplied by billions, not trillions, and it's very interesting to see the pressure that gets put onto that infrastructure. Is this the last one?
Following up on Chris's question, so on your function on the board, you gave us a way of thinking about how much revenue was coming in on each end of that spectrum, maybe 80 to 90% of these classic IT things about server consolidation, integration, compliance, but maybe 10 to 20 out on that end of the spectrum. Again, you said the R&D budget looks ahead 18 to 24 months.
Right.
How does the R&D budget get so
It's a really good question. You've probably been you know, leading this one. If I were to look at it now, look at the R&D now, and say, you know, how much of it is focused, you know, up here versus here. What you'll find is almost all of the new stuff is out here. And you find that there's a yet R&D budget, particularly as a company that's been around, and somebody had mentioned earlier about, who said, I guess quickly, you reflect your organization or that. What you really reflect is the legacy of your systems that you have to maintain and the, you know, both the sustaining and ongoing sort of feature improvement of that. So you actually find there's still a lot of people working on this stuff. And partly what you do is, while our kind of leading architects, and you know, if you look at all the new product starts, and they've been that way now for a few years, are really very much focused in this space. You know, there's still a big mass out here, so you got to, you know, sort of work on that instrument. I don't really want to give a particular percentage because it's actually not a body count thing. It's a focus thing. Right. And that's just, and I'm not trying to evade a question. It's just probably not a very useful way to look at it, is to look at it either dollars or body count. But I will say something. You know, an example of it was a few years ago. I remember. Ashley would probably remember. When did we cancel UltraSpark 5?
2004.
2004. Right. UltraSpark 5 was something that was squarely about this kind of IT. It was our Itanium. I don't think Intel has figured it out yet, but they keep reinvesting over here. And we did it very much to free the, not so much resources in terms of massive people, but to get the leading folks like, you know, the Rick Hedgertons and Mark Plays, and then their kind of 100, 200 person teams that stand behind them to go do Niagara and Rock. Okay, so I think I'll end there. I really encourage you then to go have fun, geek out, just enjoy, interact with these folks. And you take it as an exploration of, here are some sample points out here, you know, what might things look like. And I think we go till 3, is that right?
Yeah, okay. And actually, so our Sun staff will escort everyone back to the labs building, and the DARPA talk is actually happening at 1. So the DARPA overview of the DARPA talk is and it'll be in the Palace of Fine Arts, which is that first room that you started on this morning. And there's other talks, and the same demos are open as well.
Okay, thank you all.
Gervais Restaurant, authentic French cuisine in Silicon Valley.